Yep. Good
Oh,
evening
guess
and
it.
welcome to Nightfall in Amsterdam. Tonight, for the holiday celebration, whichever you choose to partake in, we are joining uh, a diverse group, primarily vampires. However, in a rare move, the Prince Gunnar, has opened his Elysium to non-vampires as well. He is hosting a rarity uh, among vampire society, a wedding ceremony. Uh, as two different vampires are decided to take vows, highly unusual, and eternity is a possibility. Uh, as we join everyone, there are a number of vampires and ghouls that are kind of serving as security around the Legenbos, which is the city forest park area where Gunner holds Elysium. And they seem to kind of be vetting people who are coming up to to come in tonight, sort of working security. However, most of the supernaturals are fairly well known and are just being waved in. Even those that these individuals aren't familiar with, they seem to have some way of detecting supernaturals. So you guys, I'll turn it over to you guys to introduce yourselves, whether you are just entering the forest or you choose to start right at sort of this clearing that is set up. There's a stone number of field stones have been stacked almost like an altar or table. Prince Gunnar stands armored and with his sword, pretty much as you see there, um, at the table. And the vampires, Marius and Thea, who are to be wed, stand there as well. Mostly vampires in the crowd. There are a couple of um, others who appear to be werewolf or mage gathering as well.
Uh, Air will just kind of stand somewhere out of the way, and she's just kind of watching everything.
A young woman steps up to the security guards out of the trees. She's extremely lithe, almost to the point of being anorexic, and tall, about 6 feet, with long black hair done in an updo. She's wearing a pantsuit with a very businesslike dress jacket on and very expensive shoes. And she introduces herself very quietly and waits for herself to be approached by the prince.
The security would wave you into the clearing and inform you that the prince will be holding court after the ceremony itself. That
Okay.
is the focus of the evening.
Are there any refreshments?
There are some as needed, nothing terribly exotic or lively, as it were, um, because
She
of the nature of the ceremony. However, he does have, um, and they will direct you to some um, basically tall stumps that have been set up or logs set up like tables.
Mm-hmm.
And there are engraved pictures at each one.
She makes a showing of going by the refreshments but not touching anything.
Pretty, like, pretty average heighted figure, dressed all in black, completely covered from head to toe. Will preach the security, and upon being waved in, will just kind of walk in. Not like he owns the place, but kind of not really paranoid, but definitely wary. And he just kind of finds a spot that people are not at and stands there. He sits if there's a chair and kind of starts scanning the crowd.
They have a number of different benches, stumps for seating, some chairs. So yeah, it's a clearing in a forest, so there's nothing real fancy. Picnic tables, benches, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The tall, dark-haired woman makes her way over towards the nearest gathering of more than two people and waits to be acknowledged before she introduces herself. Who are the nearest people to her?
If she's by the refreshments, there's a variety. Um, there's a fairly young woman, kind of dressed in almost like Wiccan type garb. Very bright colors though, and it's a pentagram and smells of incense. She has flowers in her hair and stuff. Very cheery. And she is talking to an older gentleman, with a fairly long white beard, as well as two younger men who are with him.
Okay. She approaches the older gentleman, inclines her head slightly, and holds her hand forward, palm down.
He turns and just kind of looks at you before one of the younger men that he is talking with just kind of almost scoffs a little bit, shakes his head, and then he will take her hand and give her a very light kiss on the back of the hand. And he will say, "Good evening, milady. You'll have to forgive Vigo. He is from an older and vastly different culture."
She smiles faintly and says, "It is good to see that some in the colonies at least have some manners."
He says, "Well, I had the good fortune to be well raised. Originally, across the Narrows, I studied at Oxford before I relocated here to Amsterdam."
As did I. Oxford is a lovely school. Tell me, when were you there?
Well, he kind of stops and counts, and then he looks and he says, "So, Vaniston, when was it that I ousted you in that tournament just before leaving?" And the other younger man kind of rubs his shoulder and he says, Crispin, it's been 7 years. And you didn't leave, you were kicked out because fencing with sharpened blades is prohibited.
She smiles a little bit. Aye, but so much fun.
And the gentleman he called Sylvaniston looks at you and says, well, you're not wrong. But it's usually a good sport who lets his opponent know just what variety of weapon one is using in a duel.
Okay, she full on guffaws at that, and not ladylike, like actually like deep stomach laugh.
He turns and looks and says, Vigo is, do you have any word on whether the good Ilmarie will be joining us? I know he's been rather busy lately. Can only rile up so many mobs and start so many shouting matches with a church priest.
Oh, the church. Should I be concerned? Will there be pitchforks?
And he chuckles and says, either you don't read the newspaper or you're new in town. Pitchforks was so last month.
Apparently I am new. But I forget my own manners. Sono Giovanna Annabella Castina Bianchi di Priano. It's very nice to meet you.
He looks, he says, Achilles Sylvaniston. The other fellow here who is lacking in sportsmanship is Crispin McIntyre. And this is Vigo Stendhal of the Northern Tribes.
Stendhal. It's not a family name you hear often.
He chuckles and says, it's because we stay in the north when we can.
She just nods and says, well, if you'll excuse me, gentlemen, I have other introductions to make. And she kind of walks away.
They nod, kind of bid you good evening. Jones, you would recognize the two gentlemen there who were talking to this lady as having been at the they were at the Dark Fairyland.
Okay. Jones is just gonna kind of give them a small wave and then remain on his little tree stump that he's found to sit on. It's a comfy tree stump.
One of them kind of nods back, and then shortly after, a gentleman will sit on a stump fairly close to you. Even without looking, he smells almost like a grave.
So I don't smell the anosmia.
Oh yeah, it's true. All the more reason why you might wonder why he's sitting next to you. Air, you would actually recognize this gentleman as Petrus, the Shadow Lord, who gave you your wonderful tattoo.
Oh, yes.
And he turns and says to Jones, he says, "This must be where us polite folks sit to be polite to the real polite folk, I suppose."
Something like that. Name's Jones. What's yours?
And as you look at him, you see that his skin is kind of ashen gray and almost cracking. As he looks at you and he says, "Petrus. Believe it or not, that was my name before I got this wonderful complexion."
Wish I could say the same was true for me. He'll hold out a hand for a handshake.
He shakes it and he says, "Well, sometimes the things we dabble in leave a mark."
Yeah, I know all about that. If you don't mind me asking, what caused your unique complexion?
He looks and says, "Well, turns out when you run into a couple of them Karen thieving mages who have an obsession with harvesting vampiric parts, they can throw some pretty nasty stuff at you."
So these guys were really dedicated to pissing off just about everybody then.
Well, I think they were hoping to somehow improve upon vampirism. And they tried to curse me with it. And, well, turns out mortal mages can't issue those kinds of curses very well, but they can still screw you up pretty good.
How are they doing now? Do you know?
He kind of smirks and says, "Well, pretty messed up themselves."
Good.
So, turns out that the prince there doesn't take kindly to mages that like to abuse vampires.
Yeah, makes sense. Probably wouldn't take too kindly to it myself.
He says, "Well, turns out that the dear prince there is also very creative."
Good to keep in mind, I guess.
He also is courteous, so I've taken a liking to him because of that.
Where are Air and the others sitting?
I believe Air is kind of off, kind of on her own at this point.
Yep, she's kind of standing off, like not with anybody. She's not even really standing. She's just kind of walking the outer edge away from people, just kind of watching
What does she
what's
look like?
going on. Exactly like you see in the picture. Red hair. She's wearing a pair of black dress pants and a black no-sleeve black shirt. She's pretty like in the picture, done like that.
Excellent. I just shared a link of a picture of Giovanna. You can check it
I
out.
saw that.
Giovanna walks over to her. Says, "Hello. So nice to meet another beauty here."
Well, that's a first.
What's that? Acknowledging one's own beauty or being introduced?
Never mind. So,
Pardon?
can I do something for you?
Perhaps because I am new, I do not know the niceties of the area. The what is the word I'm looking for? The small talk, I guess, would be the right way to say it. And you seem to know everyone well enough to keep your distance. Perhaps you can fill me in on some of the details.
Well, see, here's the thing. Well, this is all quite new to me, too.
Oh, perhaps we can be friends then.
Perhaps.
Let me take a wager. The tall one over there with the beard and the sword. What would you make of him?
I don't know. I've never talked to him.
What do your
I tend to
instincts
not.
tell you?
She kind of she's watching the guy that she's pointed at, trying to watch his body language and whatnot, see if she can make an assumption about his demeanor and such. I don't think I've met the guy with the beard. Out of character.
I think she was speaking of Gunna. And she mentioned the sword.
Oh, I missed the part with the sword. Oh. Well, what would I make of Gunner? I know him fairly well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I'd want to make him angry, but on the overall, he seems to be pretty fair. Skilled.
Skilled at? Skilled at the sword, or do you know
That
another
amongst
sort
other
of
things, I'm
skill
sure.
from him? She chuckles. Well then, clearly his reputation precedes him in at least some circles. I must admit, I have not met this Gunnar before tonight, and I am interested to see how his policies precede him, I suppose is the most polite way to put it.
Well, I suppose that's something you'll have to see for yourself.
And what of you? What brings you to this coupling?
Curiosity.
Something about cats. Isn't there some English saying about cats and curiosity?
Curiosity killed the cat?
Yes, that's exactly how it went. Thank you. Do take care of yourself. She giggles and walks past.
She raises an eyebrow as Giovanna walks off.
Does Giovanna get any
into,
any perception that air is anything other than mortal?
Probably not, especially in here.
Hmm.
As other people continue to file in, it seems to be kind of gearing up for the main event here, and people kind of start to simmer down, take seats.
When Air notices that people are starting to sit down, she'll find a seat somewhere towards the outer edge and back area.
Giovanna tries to find a seat to what would be Gunner's right, no matter where he's standing or sitting. She sits to his right, facing him.
Okay. Angrim does join you, Air.
Oh, all right. She'll kind of flash him a small.
Jones, you don't recognize the particular individual sitting with Air, who's at the festival, the Dark Fairy Festival, but you do notice that the gentleman who has sat with her has an eye patch over one eye.
Jones will probably be sitting probably in a very kind of a private platform. If that one guy that he was talking to, Petros, is sitting anywhere and there's an open seat, he'll probably sit next to him. But
There is. In fact, most people seem to be shying away from her, from him as well.
watch the ceremony.
Gunner stands, thanks everyone for joining tonight. He does inform everyone that after the ceremony will be typical court business, including any introductions, grievances, etc. At which point he proceeds into his ceremony. He thanks the everyone for joining, and as he speaks of joinings and gatherings, he reminds everyone that tonight is, of course, for those who celebrate it, Hallows Eve and Samhain, when the realms between the living and the dead are finished. And that is as well a joining appropriate for the evening as these two kindred prepare to join themselves to one another, both living and dead. He thanks the gods and the lands for their bounties as well. He does speak a bit from different sagas. Don't know that any, well, I don't know if Air speaks Norse at all, but he obviously speaking in some older tongues. As he finishes, he takes out takes from around his neck actually a chain. Here you would recognize it as what's referred to as a king's chain. And as the two kindred join hands, he actually uses the king's chain to bind their hands together. As he finishes up, he thanks everyone again for coming out. Raises a hand and says, as we conclude the ceremony, I ask that the kindred of Amsterdam remember that we recognize oaths, we recognize commitment and dedication. Before other things, loyalty comes first. The two vampires take a seat, at which point Gunnar then says, and of course, we have the ever thrilling court business to attend to. First and foremost, introductions. Seems appropriate before grievances. Tell me who you are before we get complaints about you, right?
Giovanna stands up, but she doesn't say anything.
He looks over to her and he says, Well, it seems we have at least one newcomer for the evening.
Jones will stand too, because I don't think he's been introduced yet.
I mean, he'll look back and he'll say, and of course, one who hasn't been formally introduced. I suppose ladies first is the modern etiquette, I believe.
She bows her head and mutters off a string of Italian, which sounds extremely formal and very old, but basically comes up as, for those who can understand it, greetings, my prince. My honors brightened in our meeting. I am here within your city, a lawful visitor who will follow the laws, who acknowledges your power, and who brings no challenge to you or your sheriff.
He chuckles a little bit and he says, it's been quite a while since I've had to worry about speaking Italian.
She bows and says, English will do.
And he says, well, it's probably easiest. It's of course, the common language these days.
I am a visitor from Europe, obviously, and I am here on business of the kind. However, my duties overlap with those duties that I am beholden to by the blood.
I see. Are there any specific duties I need to be made aware of in my city? You're not going to disrupt things too much, I hope.
I have only to say that in my waking life, I am a criminal investigator, and it is my responsibility to investigate the actions of particularly careless murderers and individuals, particularly those who have a habit of leaving a trail of bodies. I am a major crimes investigator for Interpol, and I am presently investigating a serial killer working in your city. In fact, there has recently been several bodies that have been taken, including those of several police officers, which has unfortunately raised the attention of my superiors and my sire. And so I am here to do a little cleaning up, if you understand my meaning.
He chuckles and he says, well, if you're here looking for killers, you'll be busy for a while.
Good. I like having job security.
He chuckles a bit at that and he says, I like having someone who knows how to handle paperwork.
Well, I'm certainly that.
It's good. We've been getting tired of trying to smuggle them all to the same holes everywhere to hide them. And he kind of chuckles, and as he does, a couple of the other vampires in the crowd, including Marius, who just got married, laughs.
Well, such is the joy of working for Interpol. Local coroners and medical examiners often get so overwhelmed with the duties already before them. Surely other departments will have to assist.
It seems reasonable to me. Marius kind of chuckles and says, perhaps if we bury them somewhere else, I won't have to listen to them complain every night.
She files that one away in her memory. Thank you, my prince.
He nods and says, "There's anything else, or you need to locate a specific member of your clan as a point of contact, we can discuss it privately as well if you would prefer."
Either way. I work best alone.
He says, "Well, it seems to me we all start alone at some point and end up alone at some point, so it seems best to be comfortable with it."
In standing with tradition, I will assure you that if anything that I should uncover, which falls under the purview of my employment, I shall, of course, come to you first before I act against any agents of the domain.
He gestures and says, "It's probably not the worst thought. However, Marty Delafoy," and he gestures to a man who's actually wearing a full suit with tails, walking stick, top hat, the whole 9 yards. He tips his hat and he says, "Marty is our first point of contact among the police force. She's a contracted private investigator and consultant. So,
May I ask, is he also your sheriff?
yeah."
Then I'm certain we shall talk.
Gunner chuckles and says, "All right, Sheriff? No, we're lucky if we can get Flores away from his bookkeeping most nights. My sheriff is a hands-off sheriff. There's a lot of his work through proxies and through good management."
She smiles like Angelina Jolie in Maleficent and says, "Oh, excellent. A job opening."
He chuckles and says, "No, it seems to me that hands-off sheriff has been remarkably effective. You see, I hate paperwork, I hate bookwork, and coordinating a city requires a lot of it."
Well, I see nothing in the traditions or the laws which state that a prince can't have two sheriffs.
He kind of says, "That's true. Although I've been trying not to tell Jules that. He's our scourge, and of course, if I give him a promotion, then I have to give him a raise."
That can be troublesome.
Jones will interject. It seems to me that in the event of a sheriff who prefers to keep things a bit more hands-off, that is what a hound is for.
But I dislike dogs.
That sounds like a personal problem to me. They're lovely animals.
This prince looks and says, "True, but we prefer the older term of scourge. Similar idea, but well, I'm not above a flame now and again to keep people in line."
Of course. I do like the old ways.
Speaking of the old ways, I'm going to assume it was none of ours that decided to burn a priest in a wicker man in front of a church. But it has become my problem as well, given he composed a large portion of the non-Christian old faith. So, whoever was responsible, I applaud your zealousness. Let's make sure that's a war we can win before we start it, huh?
Am I to understand that a member of the clergy was murdered in a ritual fashion after the old ways?
Yes, they've had some ongoing conflicts.
Was this particular clergyman, what is the word I am looking for? A zealot?
He looks and he says, "Aren't they all?"
Well, to varying degrees, obviously, but was he known for breaking into, foaming at the mouth ball, denouncing all kinds of sinners and standing upon a soapbox, or was this man simply a man of faith?
Well, he was the father in charge of the oldest church in Amsterdam. A pastor under him has been actively preaching and condemning those of us who practice the old faiths.
Interesting. Well, then, I shall have to keep my senses open and my eyes on the ground.
It doesn't seem to be a bad idea.
Is the perpetrator of this crime someone you would like to have brought before you?
Well, given our unique standing in this city and the fact that this could also be those who do not fall under my jurisdiction, that may not even be an option. We have among us tonight a couple of the various will working traditions, a couple of members of the local werewolf tribes as well. Should it be their people, it's of course then falls under their business to police. Now, granted, if I happen upon this person myself personally, I have no qualms of taking the matter into my own claws.
Interesting. Well, I shall be sensitive to any political problems so as not to create issues for you. However, I would very much like to know who is responsible because inevitably it will find its way onto my desk, and looking the other way is something that can be troublesome with an organization like Interpol.
At that point, Crispin and Achilles kind of had been whispering back and forth, and Achilles says, "Well, perhaps maybe the folder about our followers who were maimed and killed, brutalized with implements stolen from the torture museum, could find its way on your desk."
Unfortunately, that particular case it's fallen into a nasty jurisdictional battle and it rests on someone else's desk. I did ask to be put on that case because it does follow my particular interests and proclivities, you see. But unfortunately, the murder of policemen tends to rise a little higher on the notice of Interpol. The local major crimes investigators have the case you mentioned.
And Marty says, "Well, I suppose that means I may be getting a call soon, but one never knows."
I am happy, of course, to take any leads you may have. There's always some cred to be achieved if I can take jurisdictional oversight of a case or even wrest it from incompetent hands. And it sounds to me like there's a lot of room for improvement in how the local judiciary has been handling things.
And Crispin kind of speaks up. He says, "Well, It's funny that as soon as a friar gets beat up, everybody's up in arms, but a couple of heathen practitioners get beaten, killed, maybe a few Wiccans, and brush it under the rug, dump it down to the rookie on the night shift for something to do.
I don't disagree that the discrimination is there. In fact, I see it all too often, and it is often those who are marginalized who fall prey to, well, our own predations. They're easy to forget because the rest of society sees them as fringe on the outside, of lesser interest. But the moment a wealthy white woman is concerned about the safety of her poodle, sure enough, everybody's up in arms. So believe me, I am well acquainted with what you are describing, and I will give it my attention if it comes to me. But at best, right now, it sounds like they were mixed up in some sort of internal strife. In fact, I've heard somewhere, read a few reports that there are mages who practice demon summoning and frolicking with, Nephilim. Who knows what they might have been up to? Perhaps they cast a spell that got away from them. We have no way of knowing until I investigate whether it was even their own fault. So I'll leave all aspersions for those who like reading tabloid magazines and looking over crime scene photos.
He just kind of nods. And doesn't say a whole lot else. The prince kind of looks, says, well, before we stray off into any further tangents, I believe Mr. Jones has been waiting quite patiently.
Jones will stand back up. Jones, Glen Nosferatu, child of Steve. I'm skilled at information gathering, system cracking, and various thuggery of multiple names. Yeah, need anything done, feel free to let me know. I'll just kind of look at the prince after saying that.
He just kind of nods and says, oh, always good to have a motivated member of the community. Certainly. Yeah. We appreciate the offer. We'll have to see what we can do. But I'm sure there's plenty of other people who would be happy to hire you on for freelance work as well.
I'll leave a number.
He says that seems like a prudent decision. Perhaps with Jules, the scourge, he can make sure it gets passed around.
He'll nod and is that all there is to say on that matter? He'll go ahead and sit back down.
He turns and says, well, I suppose that in the crowd that seems to be it, but I do have a couple of others that I need to introduce myself. for prudence sake, lest it become a conflict later. Yeah. Turns and says, "We are fortunate to be joined this evening. First and foremost, by a child of my own who has spent about 100 years or so out of the city, but we're pleased to welcome back Steig of Clan Gangrel. With him, he has brought a young woman, and while I find your audacity fairly bold, Steig, he has brought a living woman with him tonight. The young Roisin, who he has raised and taught. She will be joining our ranks in the near future. I look forward to that. I think it should be an interesting experience. I understand Mr. Dunsern, who has chosen not to join us tonight due to a differing faith, has a number of family members in town as well. Remind everybody that Clan Giovanni will not interfere in our business, and we have to do the same for them. That being said, should you wish to do personal business with them, that is at your discretion. And he turns and he gestures and he says, "We also have another gentleman, Brian O'Bear, who has been in the city some time, although he's often overlooked." And he gestures back, and from out of the trees comes a fairly large winged form. As he gets closer, you are able to recognize him as a gargoyle. It says Brian came to us from Ireland not long ago, but was not prepared yet to formalize his residence here. And then, of course, last but not least, we have any gestures to the back where there's a fairly tall, pale man. Man's skin is almost slightly blue tinged. He says, "I'd like to welcome Alig from the Scottish Isles to the north." Alig understandably keeps him to himself, much like some of the rest of us, and he kind of grins, showing his very pronounced canines and his golden orange eyes. Don't always blend in very well. However, he has given me contact information for any who do wish to visit him, get to know him. He, much like Brian, was unsure whether the city was a good fit, but because of our unique dynamics, has decided to stay with us for the time being. As I believe that concludes our introductions, I would ask if anyone has any grievances, concerns, or particular goings on in the city they wish to discuss.
Giovanna stands up again, slowly this time. I would love to know a little bit more about the local rules around interactions with other entities, she says as she turns and looks at the non-vampires.
Well, for the most part, if they're civil, we're civil.
And if they're not?
Well, obviously, if it is a immediate safety concern, you have the right to defend yourself. If it's a simply less than civil gathering, separating and voicing that grievance back to us that we can address it. We do have a fairly good working relationship with most of them, and he kind of gestures to Achilles and Crispin. He says the mages, for the most part, cooperate well with us, as do some of the werewolves, and he gestures over to Petrus.
Are there any areas of the city which are off limits to us?
He looks and he says, well, for understandable safety reasons, they've not decided to disclose to me where they keep their own stronghold, which is understandable. However, obviously they're keeping them discreet enough. As I have not yet found a knife in my back for walking down the wrong street. So I would say at this point we don't have any immediate off areas.
Is there an area of the city you would prefer that I make my accommodations?
He says, well, I don't have a preference. I can say if you have a concern with your work, the downtown has good loft type apartments.
I don't require much space, but I do want to make sure that I'm not disturbing my neighbors. Is there an area of the city which is somewhat more tolerant of loud noises?
Well, that some of the club regions, I would call them. There's a good section where they have clubs on the lower levels, apartments in the areas.
Perhaps then Wistaport or Depip?
Can see what we can come up with. This might be one of those examples where our hands-off sheriff is the expert. He was Minister of Justice and financed some 200 years ago, and is fairly familiar with the layouts and business licensing of the city.
Understood.
He can perhaps point you to best options.
I think that shall work to my needs. Is there anything else that should come to my attention, perhaps due to my employ or my desire to see the underside of your lovely city?
Yeah. Kind of just gestures around and he says, well, we've got a standing rule here. If you kill it, you clean it up and you make sure you get your use out of it. We don't need wasteful violence. So understand if you do find something that is one of ours, it comes to me because that's well before mortal law, that's a violation of our laws.
Of course. Well, I thank you, my prince, for the bringing me to awareness. If there's anything that you require of me, you need only call.
I will tell you this, while you're free to interact with other supernaturals and other folk of the night, should you get yourself involved in their affairs and become endangered, that stands outside my protection. While I am happy to protect those people under me, I will not protect them from their own decisions.
That's a wise policy.
Yeah.
I have the fortune of carrying with me good discretion, for often when I am chasing down certain leads, I often drag in my wake a significant number of very heavily armed and very trigger-happy humans, and nobody really wants that on their doorstep. So I will be careful, of course.
Probably a wise decision. Yeah, point of order, I'm sure you, of course, have already filed paperwork, but just in case you have not, the mortal authorities don't take kindly to firearms without documentation. I'm sure with your position, should that be required, you'll handle it, but just a friendly reminder.
Already done. I shall be sure to keep the more exotic pieces from my collection out of sight and under key.
That's probably a wise decision.
Well, my best wishes of longevity and happiness to the married couple, of course. And thank you so much for having me here in your court.
He nods and says, well, we appreciate the courteous followings. And, well, our traditions might not be quite as fancy or stringent. I appreciate that the old ways are at least respected here.
Should they always be, indeed.
He turns back kind of to the crowd. And anyone else have any grievances or concerns? Yeah, kind of waves an arm around and he says, nobody? We have a town hall meeting once a season, and if priests being burned, heathens tortured to death, child vampires. Maybe that's one that some of you are concerned with, but are hesitant to bring up.
Her attention is she kind of focuses when he says that.
So let me make my policy quite clear. Child vampires are to be brought into custody. Should a kindred in good standing be willing to vouch for them and act as caretaker, the child will be treated as a fledgling of no clan and treated as childer of the warder. You will be held accountable for that child vampire's actions. Should they break tradition, you will pay the price with them. Secondly, this does not extend to those who have decided to create these creatures. As my child Steig has demonstrated, if you have a child who is a good candidate, school them, raise them, educate them until they are old enough and prepared to join us. Any who were responsible for creating a child vampire, you have two options. If you can prove they were responsible, either through their own confession, through the positive identification from the child, or through mystical means, I grant the right of destruction and amaranth against those individuals. Or should you bring them back to me intact, I offer a blood boon. Any child vampire that we cannot locate a patron for, that is deemed a risk by the community at large and no one is willing to take care of, will be executed as per the traditions. I'm willing to grant some flex if someone else is willing to step in, but I am not willing to put our city and our existence at risk of some misguided ideal of compassion. Last but certainly not least, there is a group of the werewolves that is currently trying to negotiate a truce with us. They have expressed a hostility towards those werewolves who have already allied with us. I suspect they are hoping to avoid a two-front conflict. Should they cross us, we are not obligated to remain neutral. Should you see a pack of werewolves on the hunt, I recommend not engaging, but you are free to do so if you wish. I understand from Marius that ashes take up a very small amount of space in his graveyard. Any other individual matters can be brought before me. I will be holding a semi-open court here the remainder of the week as I engage in a number of other ceremonies as well. These will include, for those of you sensitive to such things, communion with spirits from the other side and with spirits of the land. Should you choose to engage these beings, you do so at your own risk.
Jones is going to raise a hand.
Yes, Mr. Jones.
Minor quibble. You bury ashes in a cemetery, not a graveyard.
He looks at you and he says, I don't bury them anywhere. I let them blow away.
The collective you buries ashes in a cemetery, not a graveyard.
I believe Marius's property consists of both. My terminology may be lacking as the concept is primarily Christian, but I thank you for the clarification.
Jones puts his hand back down and inwardly delights in being anarchy.
He gestures and says, well, if there's nothing further, you're certainly all free to mingle, socialize, share news, drink the blood that I was able to provide. I apologize that I wasn't able to bring more live specimens, but given the nature of the evening, I didn't feel it wise. And he kind of looks over at Steig and he says, to bring those with heartbeats and an inability to defend themselves. He kind of steps away from the altar, puts his, kind of signaling the meeting itself is at an end. As he begins to do what appear to be personal preparations for something.
Jones probably just gonna bounce after the meeting is adjourned.
Alright, well, it does seem to be wrapping up. There's certainly some other individuals kind of having their own local meetings, but nothing real major.
Harry's still kind of glancing around, still not really sure how to proceed, being as obviously she's never been to something like this.
I need a perception awareness from, actually, let's go with empathy.
From who?
From both of you.
You said XP spends were
good to go.
I just want to make sure because it does make a difference. I raised my perception, that's why.
What's the difficulty?
Standard.
Hey, I got one success.
You would recognize that Well, the prince appears to be preparing something at the altar, and the young woman you see pictured there is standing by. Steig seems somewhat displeased with how things are, with whatever the prince has going on.
Oh,
I will make my roll, but you said experience approved or not?
Yes.
Okay. Like I said, it made a difference of the die here.
oh yeah,
Okay,
Jones.
fancy that. I have the same amount.
You had one as well?
Yep.
Alright, so you would notice as well that Steig seems relatively unhappy with whatever the prince is preparing. As the young lady waits by the altar.
Jones will like do a 300 or not 300, 180-degree turn. Pull out a couple pieces of paper, write down his name, number on both of them, and he will give one to I believe it was recommended the Scourge, and he'll give one to the lady looking displeased at the altar as well.
All right. Um, Obviously young as you approach. She's maybe in her 20s. She looks at you and as she takes it, and she says, "It was Jones, was it not?"
It was. I don't believe I caught your name though.
Roisin. We are currently in service to Steig, although my understanding is Prince Gunnar will be gifting me with the opportunity to join the kindred.
Are we pretty close to the prince right now, or like?
You're probably good 10 feet away.
Okay, so if I talk quietly, you probably wouldn't hear it.
No, he seems relatively engaged in whatever he is doing as well.
Okay. I'll kind of drop his voice a little bit and say I couldn't help but notice you seem a little upset about what the prince seems to be doing over there.
She nods and towards Steig, the younger Norseman, and she says, "It's well, unfortunately, it's I suppose I just recently learning the effects of having spent the years drinking from Steig. I thought perhaps I cared for him, loved him even, but to learn that those feelings were created to control me, and at the same time he is displeased, so I am displeased for him, whether I want to be or not, and it's rather frustrating. Although
Understandable.
the prince tells me that he will break this bond before siring me, that I have entered the next life with the freedom to choose my own path.
What if he's lying?
She looks at you and she says, "Then I am no worse than I am now, bound to a man who has manipulated me for decades, slowed my aging, took me from my family when I was young, before I was even old enough to remember their faces.
All I'm saying is that typically, at least it was the case for me, speak for others, of course, but whenever one is sired, they tend to hold those strong feelings towards whomever sired them. So while he may break the bond before siring you, as soon as he does, it'll be right back.
Oh my. Well, I understand that it will be given to be told lesser than one that has accumulated over decades.
For sure.
And
still there.
Even if it does remain in the same force, it will at least not be tainted by the betrayal and deception.
While they're talking, Air is kind of watching the Stag dude again to just further try to pick up on why he's agitated. Like, just try if there's anything else she does.
Give me a perception alertness.
Oh God, nothing. Story of my life.
You're not really sure why he's agitated, but he's definitely agitated.
She's going to kind of slowly get up and move towards the front area closer to Jones and them. Not moving. She's kind of trying to see what Gunner is doing at the same time. Her general curiosity here.
He is giving a number of different seems to be calling upon different spirits as he gives blood offerings to the earth.
Okay. She doesn't want to disrupt him because as a Theurge, she kind of knows how important offering things to the earth, etc., can be, especially blood, as she's done it. She's more or less watching him curiously, but keeping an eye on things around too.
All right. He does kind of finish up, or at least has a break in what he's doing.
Okay.
And he kind of glances over at you.
She will smile slightly.
He says, "I trust it was an interesting experience."
Indeed. Obviously, very new as well.
It always is.
Oh.
Yeah, says, is there anything you want to discuss that perhaps wasn't appropriate to broach at the
She kind of glances around at the others that are close by and says, well, there may be a thing or two, but business should be in us and not for other ears. And she kind of glances at the others around. But at the moment, I was just genuinely curious to see your ritual. Sorry if that seems weird, but
He says, no, not at all. It's a fairly different process that we will be engaging in tonight. He nods and says, yeah, Roshina is originally from the Irish Isles. She was taken by Steig many years previously, and as she got older, he discovered she had certain affinities to other types of magics as well. Well, I'm sure he would be thrilled to make her his own child. I superseded him in that.
it'd be rude of me to ask what those abilities are.
So, well, part of that is we're not entirely sure. We have suspicions just based on the hints that have happened so far.
Like?
That she has experienced the lands of the dead already.
Oh my. Gotta be intense. I've only caught but a small glimpse, and well, I didn't dare investigate further.
She has apparently been able to pass there and back, although not as easily as some. But to do so naturally and as a mortal, it's unusual. More importantly, she can bring some back with her. She has shackled spirits of the dead already, and according to Steig, at one point he was gone for too long, and she raged and killed one of her caregivers.
She doesn't say that, but she kind of looks over at the girl, and I'm gonna use sense to the true form on her. Okay. Moment he says that. primal urge. Difficulty varies. Oh no, it's still 6. That's right. I just need X amount of successes. Okay. Yes. Oh, 1.
One, you would know she's not a werewolf. Yeah.
Tells Guru automatically.
Yeah. He says, well, when when mortals feed from our blood, if they go too long, they frenzy in the same way we do when we are hungry. That violent outburst caused her to kill her caregiver. In her remorse, she gave her a ceremonial burial. The following night, her caregiver was wandering the grounds.
I can't imagine anything but pleasant.
Well, there are normally very few of our kind who can manipulate the dead or craft undead. It will be interesting to see what effect our blood has on her when she joins it.
Okay. So what happens if, say, she doesn't have kindred blood?
If we were to starve her?
Beyond frenzy, yes.
Well, eventually she can begin to age rapidly while her body catches back up to where it was before it was slowed. She loses the benefits of it, certainly.
I see. And so when do you intend to do this?
Well, the appropriate time would be at the peak of the night.
Yeah.
The veil between the realms is finished there.
Indeed. How much longer is it till that point of the night, by the way, out of character?
It's probably another hour, hour and a half.
Would it be inappropriate for me to ask her if there's anything that she'd like to do before that point that she has yet to do in this life?
Oh, well, you're welcome to ask. I suspect she doesn't, given the fact that she asked for this to occur tonight.
Well, that's fine.
Communing with the spirit of the sept here, as well as the other spirits of the lambs.
Huh.
So, opportunity for people to get in touch with those spirits as well, but
All right, very well. And she kind of glances over at the girl, trying to get a feel for her.
she seems fairly focused on the upcoming um, event. You know, she's kind of interested in what exactly Gunner's doing, and seems to be fairly prepared for the the ritual, as it were. He's at this point begun to mark runes around the altar as well. And you notice that a couple of others have begun to dig a pit behind the altar too.
How big is the pit?
Uh, Big enough for a couple people to fit in.
Okay. Is there anything I can do to help?
He says, "Well, if you wanted to grab a shovel, but that seems unnecessary. You have a fairly industrious gargoyle doing most of the work."
Very well. And she's going to let him. I'll let you get back to what you're doing then. And I will come speak with you within the next few days, if that's all right.
Certainly.
And she's going to approach the girl.
She looks at you.
Forgive the odd question, but seems with what's going on, you're aware of the things going on, but is there anything in particular that you want to do before this ritual takes place?
She looks at you and says, "I think it's pretty pretty cut and dry. As much as I might like to, the things that I would wish to do are not an option.
Why not?
She nods towards Steig and she says, because no matter how much I wish it, cutting his throat will not change anything.
It's an interesting thing to want to do.
She looks at you and she says,
Dare I ask why? She's keeping her voice down low, too.
because over 80 years ago, he stole me from my family, killed them, and through feeding me of his own blood, caused me to age slowly to this point, dragging things out. I didn't even know I had a family until recently.
What do you mean until recently?
When the prince informed me of the truth, in order for Steig to explain the abilities of my that I had seems to have developed. He had to tell the prince more of how he found me. The prince refused to let him keep it secret, telling me himself and then compelling him to tell me the truth too.
Is difficult thing. Most of mine, I understand most of mine are gone, though a few remain. I'm not close with my siblings. They're on other paths. If they're still even around. My parents were taken from me, as was the place I called home for so long. But other things, you eventually learn to, I guess, sort of get past it. You just have to focus on a goal, whether it be finding what's left.
Well, perhaps I can discover that once I better understand who I am and who I'm going to become.
Well, I'm generally pretty close to here because the few that I have left are here. She kind of glances over towards the ritual area and at Gunner. Rituals are... I find them interesting. I like to learn what I can.
She just kind of nods and says, there are some things that cannot be learned from books.
There are many things that cannot be learned from books. But experience, spirits have a wealth of information. Just have to know the right questions.
I suppose that is true.
I think that you'll find that Gunner will treat you well.
She says, well, I certainly hope so. He's been far more honest than the other one ever was.
Oh, I'm sorry. And she holds out her hand. I apologize. I'm Air Sigurdsson. And she kind of holds out her hand.
She nods and says, well, though I've just recently discovered my true last name, I am Rasheen Flynn.
It is definitely an Irish last name.
She says, well, Rasheen is Gaelic for rose.
Pretty.
She chuckles a little bit and says, seems appropriate since everyone throws roses into the graves.
Not everyone.
She nods and she says, well, it's true. And she gestures towards Gunner and she says, they're saying is he prefers fire, but I think I will pass on that.
Well, I wouldn't know so much about that, but yes, some do do use fire in their funeral rites as well as blood and a variety of other things.
She says, well, it's to each their own, I suppose. The stag taught me to bury below the frost line and let the frost and the Jotun keep the dead.
Hmm. Gunnar mentioned that you have certain abilities that allow you to experience the lands of the dead.
She nods and she says yes to some degree. Though Gunnar believes that it will change or expand after this.
It may. I've only very briefly seen that, and I dared not fully enter, but there may perhaps be a place of some interest to you that I could show you if you would like.
She says no, says so.
She just kind of smiles. She's like, yeah.
And where might that be?
She's talking about the tree in the fairylands, just out of character. It's a great tree.
Well, it certainly sounds like it. I certainly keep that in mind. When did you want to visit?
Well, I can take you whenever you would like to, provided it's all right with the forces that be. And she glances over at Gunnar.
She says, well, I do understand that I have a little bit of, we'll be having more independence under him than I had in the past,
Yes.
so. But I have a feeling my evening will be tied up rather soon.
Yes. will be. I would gladly take you when you are ready.
She says, well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate the gesture. You haven't had opportunity to get to know many people.
I'll be around here more than most. And she kind of flashes a smile. You could call this home, as it were.
She nods and she says, well, I imagine I will see you around then, because I assume this will be home for me as well.
Indeed. Well, before you do this, if you'd like to join me and meditate and pay some sort of homage to the spirits of this place, I would gladly welcome you to do so.
Yeah. At that, Gunnar kind of looks over and says, what exactly do you think I've been doing?
You have. She smiles. But I have not.
He looks at you and says, tonight she will be embraced by Not herself, the spirit of the night, goddess of the night, and spirit of this cairn.
Air nods. Mm-hmm.
He looks at you, looks up into the sky and says, I would suspect within the next quarter hour or so, we will see the it will be time. If you wish to commune yourself, I suggest you do it quickly.
Very well then. And she looks at her and says, if you wish to join me for a brief period.
Yeah. Looks as she gets up and heads towards heads over with you.
All right. She'll pick a relatively close place that they can get to, but still kind of secluded and away. And she'll find a place to sit down and meditate. I forget what the spirit of this place is. It's not the winter one because it's the...
No, this is not.
Yeah, that's the other sept. And this one wasn't listed, so...
Yeah, not is the one
Where's
here.
the spirit? Right. I can't remember what the totem spirit is here.
Yeah,
Out of character.
The
Not.
goddess.
Okay. And she will sit down and meditate, and she will let's see. Look at my sheet here. Meditate and meditate and hope for a pray basically to the sept spirit for a easy transition for this girl here. And
Gotcha.
normally for something like this, right, a cleansing, but that's not really appropriate on someone who's had vampire blood. That would be painful.
Probably.
So she won't do that. But in her meditation, she will also some gnosis. The process being as last time. Yeah, she'll meditate on the spirits of the earth here too, as well as the totem, and even offer a little blood to the earth of her own blood. She's been known to do that.
All right. As you do, your vision kind of goes dark. And you hear a soft woman's voice. And it says, she says, "Do not fear for this one. She is coming back home. The night embraced her long ago. And while your enemies may think they wield the shadows, they forget that the darkness belongs to the night, and a shadow is simply a vague recollection of night." Then your vision kind of returns, and you see around her a number of wispy, spiritual, like ghost type spirits.
Ghost type spirits. Can I tell what kind of demeanor they have?
They're blatantly friendly. fact, the only reason you don't, or you can tell they're not ancestors, is the fact that you don't sense any gnosis from them.
Very well. And she will kind of smile faintly. And she'll look at, I'm just going to call her Rose because it's a lot easier for me. She'll look at Rose and she'll say, "We don't know each other well, but if it's into take you under his wing, I will consider you family."
She just kind of smiles at you and nods. Says,
I
appreciate that.
And she's already offered her blood to the earth. She'll dab her palm where she's made herself bleed and put the blood on her forehead.
And she
just enough to get a little smidge of her blood on her forehead.
She nods again and thanks as she gets up and prepares to head back.
And she will follow her. She'll stick around for this ritual because curiosity. But she is going to keep an eye on that Steig guy as this ritual goes on.
He is not there. You notice Nora's jewels.
All right. Well, she'll is there anybody else present, like, other than just Gunnar?
Petrus has stayed. The Shadow Lord Theurge.
She will give him a nod.
Yeah. Nods back as well.
Anybody else, or?
That's about all that you see present.
Petrus and Gunnar?
Yeah. It seems like everyone else is kind of cleared out of this area. And over like near where the trail comes in, you can see Victor, the who you were introduced to as the Seneschal. And he kind of seems to be standing, not quite standing guard, but kind of making sure no one else comes in to interrupt.
Okay. Because she's pretty much is that Dresden? She'll stick around because she told this girl, like, hey, you're family now. And unless someone says she needs to leave, then
No, Petra seems to be kind of assisting, and the um, she lays down, and you notice there's a number of different languages, runes, and symbols drawn on the
Okay.
altar, and then get drawn on her. At which point they then carefully begin to drain her, and you notice that her blood is being drained into two large horns that are covered in runes.
Okay.
And Petrus looks at Gunnar and says, "Are you sure this is the one you want to try this with?" And Gunnar says, "You saw her spirits, and you smelled her blood the first time when she bled here. As he says that, roll me a perception, primal urge."
Standard?
Yes.
I'm going to drop a willpower because my rolls have been sucking tonight.
Okay.
And that's 2 with the willpower.
You smell some sort of strange pure breed in her blood, but that's all you can make out. It's not one you're familiar with.
I'm going to try to catalog this smell.
Okay.
So I can describe it later or ask about it later.
And as she continues to bleed out, you can hear her breathing stop. Shortly after, Gunnar takes out a dagger, and he holds it up in front of Petrus, and he cuts his palm. Petrus cuts his palm as well, and they both clasp hands over her. Their blood together drips into her mouth, and then Gunnar says, "Now," he picks her up, sets her in the hole, takes out what looks like a big rectangular shield, and he lays 2 other people in the hole next to her and lays the shield over all 3 of their heads so they can breathe, or so that so their face doesn't get fully buried.
All right. Are these other people alive?
Well, they appear to be, although unconscious.
Okay.
And
just drained all of their blood.
he sets. Then he gives a sort of a whistle, and the gargoyle comes. Excuse me. Returns to and begins burying her. Gunnar takes the two horns and wraps the tops in leather, and you see runes carved in or paint on the leather as well. And then
Can I tell what the runes are?
They don't appear to be Norse symbols.
Okay.
At least not all of them. There's some, but not all. And then Mihai comes over and takes them and takes them over to a building, the two horns, before returning. Gunnar looks over at you and he says, "Tonight is done. Tomorrow we shall see."
Indeed.
I doubt she will surface before the 9th, before 9 o'clock. If you wish to return.
And she just kind of smiles slightly.
He turns and says, "Tonight, if you wish, Petrus may have things to share with you. I suggest you seek him out. He is going to go look for a fire and some food."
We'll join him.
Yeah.
Though I still will have questions for you later.
He says, "In return later, I shall be here."
Excellent.
And with that, he turns back to the altar and sits down and seems to be meditating.
And she will glance over at Petrus.
He's already started off to where you can see some fires in the distance through the woods.
Okay. She will go out there. Give me a hot second. Here. Okay,
All
I'm
right.
back. Sorry.
Did
I
you
see your
want to
message
just,
there in the side chat.
yeah, we can, if you want to just do the conversations by Blue Book, we can do that.
Perfect.
All right.
Yeah, she'll follow towards the fires.
There's a number of like roast boar and traditional foods at the fire, and he just kind of gestures to the fire and invites you to join him.
And she will.
All right, then we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, players, for playing and watchers for watching. Been another episode of Nightfall in Amsterdam.